Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes, and this is a series with Advanced Resilient Technology. We are partnering with Advanced Resilient Technology. We are already start working with different government, different corporations, and academy in Asia Pacific. Definitely, we will invite Advanced Resilient Technology in Malaysia and other part of Asia Pacific. That time maybe we can understand more and about the technology. But today's session is very important. We will discuss about decent work and economic development, but how this technology actually helpful for Asia Pacific. This is important. Beside that, what type of technology they are utilizing, and most important thing is joint ventures, because joint venture is the key for business developments. Yes, in Asia Pacific, many corporations do joint venture with developed worlds. Definitely, Mr. Marshall and his team has extremely valuable technologies. They know the game, how to bring the impact investment, and most important thing is that they have a very professional team, which will be very helpful for the developing worlds. So first, I would like to give chance, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Sharif. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Today, we're going to be talking about the issue as Sharif talked about the joint ventures in Europe. I mean, not in the developing world. This is important, specifically for people who are involved in ESG, environment, sustainable, and governance. People that are trying to gain an understanding why certain methodologies can capture carbon and how that happens, and that these methodologies can lead to decent work and to economic growth, specifically in the developing world. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and if you've seen our previous presentations, we've seen this slide. The key benefits of public-private partnerships. Now, normally, David Smith, one of our team members, who's an expert in this area, would be talking about this. But currently, right now, he is unable to attend this particular presentation. So I will step into his shoes, and I just want to go through this because this is the premise of working in the developing world. We need to consume less time and improve monitoring. We need to promote infrastructure development and local development. So whether it's in Malaysia, Africa, other parts of the Asian continents or subcontinents, it's important. We need to increase technical and technological cooperation. In that regard, we're going to be talking a little bit about why carbon sequestration is important and what tools can make that happen. We need to provide what are called elastic services, elastic meaning flexible services that reduce service costs, but at the same time provide high-paying or good-paying jobs into the local economy, and at the same time raise the local economy economic value. And build cooperative growth through private center integration together with the public center. We need to share the risk, in other words, with private partners. Right now, most governments, whether they're at a provincial or state level or a federal level, are taking on the risks, and their banks are taking these risks. We have a method in which to reduce that. And of course, we talked about that in our very first presentation where we were mobilizing climate finance through a mechanism for developing world. And in the last session, we talked about how joint ventures for the developing world can access that type of capital and reduce the risk and risk mitigate for the local governments. Also, we need to help lessen public sector budget constraints. That's on the left-hand side of that slide. That's important because we found a mechanism, as we described in the last session, how to do that. And of course, we need to promote innovation and creativity. And that's where the World Talent Economic Forum and Sharif's groups and people like him come to the fore because they have the connections. He's a professor. He has associated with universities, with labs in universities that can help create innovation and promote creativity. And of course, the ultimate thing is to consume less time and improve the monitoring, as I said at the beginning. Next slide. So what are we talking about? We're talking about negative emission options. In COP26, there was a lot of people were upset by the fact that they didn't see too many outcomes from it, but there were actually many outcomes that were not broadcast too widely. But one of the things is that everybody was talking about how they can get to net zero, meaning zero emissions, and by what year. Well, as I've described in previous presentations, there is a climate clock in New York City, not the one that counts down for New Year's that we just had at 42nd Street, but the one at 14th Street in Union Square that's counting down how many years are left or months are left before we get to the point of no return for the emissions that are created in the climate. That is man-made over the past several hundred years of industrial development. And there is no, I think there's a misunderstanding by other people that we're criticizing oil and gas or coal or big ag or those folks. We're not. We recognize that without oil and gas, we would have never gotten to the industrial world we have today and raised the standard of living that we have today in those countries. But we need to share that with the developing world, but we need to do it now so that we have negative emissions. And so what are the options? We believe that the option that we're advocating is a hybrid solution. We want to use proven technology, which we're going to discuss a little bit about. We need to make it affordable. We need to make it durable and long lasting. We need to make it scalable to meet the need. That's been a big problem in many regards. One of the benefits of the oil and gas and coal industries and big ag and big chemical is that they could actually make more money ultimately than the way they're making money now and have negative emissions. We need to solve this global problem where the climate clock is counting down, and we need to handle the volume and produce value at the same time. And ultimately, we need to store carbon. And it's a carbon removal landscape that you see on the left-hand side of the slide. And if people are interested in getting the slide, you can contact us or contact Sharif specifically. Next slide. So at this point, we have alternatives in front of us. And I'm going to hand off to Mark Sabin to discuss some of the alternatives that we have in front of us. And obviously, we've talked about the hybrid approach, but there are other approaches, and they can all be kind of integrated. And I'll let Mark handle that.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Sharif, for hosting us again today. When we look at the alternatives of what's available to be able to get us to this carbon negative goal that we're after, there are a number of different ways that it can be approached. And really what we need to do is we need to synthesize all of them in this effort so that one does not override the other, but each of them has to work in conjunction with the other. So in the previous slide, we saw the ways that what the landscape is about being able to turn the amount of carbon that's going into the atmosphere around through various main methods. And many of those are nature-based. So one of the primary ones we see is forestation. We're seeing a lot of deforestation in the developing world. But if we start to plant trees, that's one of the most affordable ways that we have to be able to mitigate what's happening and to be able to absorb some of the carbon that's coming in. Now, that in terms of the durability, of course, forests are subject to fires. They're subject to what's happening with global warming. So each of these things has an impact. And I know that in India, there are millions of trees currently being planted along some of the riverbeds there. And this is extremely important because it helps to capture the water that's coming down so we don't see as much flooding. But it also helps us to address some of the other climate issues in the way that the carbon gets absorbed. Now, of course, in terms of its scalability, it's limited in its scalability. It takes a lot of it's really motivated by people power more than anything else. But it must be done in a way that is sustainable because there is a lot of science to what's required to do forestation and some of the other natural methods that we use to be able to capture carbon. On the technology side, on the third column there are a number of other technologies that are currently being used. One of them is a recently launched air capture, which is taking carbon directly out of the atmosphere. That system, although it's fairly effective at doing what it does, it's extraordinarily expensive in terms of being able to turn the carbon into something that is sequestered and then is done in a way that actually supports what we're trying to do in terms of being able to work on developing both the economy for these local areas and for the developing world, as well as being able to do the environmental work that's happening when we capture carbon and we begin to go into that carbon negative solution that we're after. The other issue, of course, is that the technology, although it's scalable, again, what you're looking at is the enormous investment that's required to be able to do that and be able to get that to work. We're also dealing with many of these technologies are fairly new in their development. So the investment side of using these kinds of technologies can be at a higher risk than some of the others. Now, in terms of the hybrid solutions in the middle column, and specifically pyrolytic biochar, the carbon capture and storage methodology, we're talking about using a technology that has been in use now for more than 80 years. And it is essentially what we're doing is we're converting biomass and other kinds of waste products by burning them in the absence of oxygen, which means that they're not emitting into the atmosphere more carbon, but they're actually being able to capture the carbon and store it. So these kind of systems are not only provable, but they're also affordable in terms of what we are talking about in today's world, and they're deployable in the areas where they're most needed. So one of the things that is available about the kind of hybrid technologies is the fact that if we want to be able to deploy them throughout the developing world in the locations where they're needed, this is a viable solution in many, many ways. The other things that happen is that when we capture the carbon, as we do through this, through the biochar, which is the name most commonly used, or elemental char as we like to call it, that capture can last for decades or hundreds of years, depending on how it's stored. So, for instance, in the inorganic waste conversion, much of that material can be then used in building materials, which we will help in the developing world for construction and for roadways and for building the infrastructure to make the economy more viable. But it will also store the carbon and begin to extract it from the atmosphere. So we're talking about, again, reaching that carbon negative goal that we're looking at. The other thing that has really changed in particularly in the methodology that we're deploying for the advanced resilient technology is the scalability of the system so that we can convert enough volume of mass of the waste into the usable chars that we use. So there are a number of different kinds of things that can be done in a sustainable way to bring these solutions into the developing world in a way that supports the goals of climate change, that supports the issues that we've talked about previously about the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. It is an economic benefit into these companies, into the countries, and it also offers a lot of social advancements in terms of education, in terms of employment, and in terms of being able to turn the health of the local communities around.
Next slide.
The next slide.
And we're going to use this slide. This slide was sourced from folks that understand a material known as biochar, or what we call elemental char, that comes out of the machine from pyrolysis. And I'm going to hand this off to Don Carly.
Well, thank you. So in Mark's overview of the various approaches, we talk about hybrid solutions, and within that particular set of solutions, there is the use of pyrolysis, which is a thermochemical conversion process that generally is heating biomass in the absence of oxygen. And depending on the temperature at which the reaction occurs and the duration of time that the biomass is in the pyrolysis chambers, and also the nature of the biomass, there are effectively three different outputs, the percentages of which will vary based on the configuration of the system. Now, in ART's case, the system is operating at a lower temperature and thereby primarily focusing on the production of biochar. Biochar, which can then, as you can see, be used in a number of applications as either a soil amendment in regenerative farming, as a animal feed amendment that can help to reduce the mortality or improve the mortality of livestock and even reduce greenhouse gas emissions from livestock, interestingly. And of course, in addition to being able to use it in those amendment processes, where if used in soil amendment, it is locked into the soil, it can also be used in building materials and other applications. For example, biochar can be used to increase the efficiency of anaerobic digesters that are employed in water treatment. They can also be, of course, employed as remediation materials to help absorb chemicals such as PFAS and even radionuclides. So it's very useful as a filtration medium because of adsorbent characteristics. So that's the primary output. And of course, in addition to its uses, where as a component in building materials, or it can also simply be stored as a carbon sink, if you will, that has extremely significant duration. The need for that is really driven by the growing number of corporations in the developing world and developed world who are committing to net zero targets, science-based targets, and committing to help align those science-based targets with the 1.5 degree centigrade warming goals, keeping things under the 1.5 degree centigrade warming objectives of the COP26 and Paris agreements. So there is an appetite for carbon removal credits, durable carbon removal credits. We're seeing that with companies like Microsoft and others who are buying, in some cases, at $100 to $200, in some cases $500 or $600 a ton, carbon removal credits, different from carbon credits that we might have thought of that are investing in more temporary nature-based solutions that are subject to review. We can also produce bio-oil. Of course, this is from the condensable vapor that is generated in the process. That can also be put into geological storage. There are some companies in Europe that are now doing that. Or it can be used as an alternative to petrochemical fossil fuels, as an alternative to diesel, for example, from fossil fuel sources. In addition, another output is syngas or pyrogas, which can be used as a renewable fuel, although there is some challenge being made to whether the savings, if you will, or it would be better to sequester that or to process it further through a process called methane pyrolysis, where you strip the carbon out as pure carbon and the hydrogen as pure hydrogen, and then use the hydrogen as a fuel. So these processes all, however, do center on the use of the thermochemical conversion, the heating in an oxygen-deprived atmosphere biomass, which if it comes from sustainable sources, for example, in Malaysia, there is about 168 million tons of biomass produced each year. The significant proportion of that, of course, being from palm oil production wastes. But there are also other industries that need the credits in the developing world. For example, 25% of all the bricks in the world are made in Southeast Asia, are manufactured in Southeast Asia with very carbon intensive processes using coal and coke to produce them. The potential to now incorporate biochar into those products as building products allows you to start offsetting some of the carbon impacts of those materials. And again, while it only contributes about 1%, for example, to the economy, brick manufacturing, to the economy of Bangladesh, it represents 8 to 10% of Bangladesh's GHG greenhouse gas emissions. So a little bit of change can make a lot of difference, and there's a ready appetite in the developing world for the purchase of those credits and materials that are deemed to be carbon negative or carbon neutral.
Thank you very much. That's really an important component here. So the next
I'd like to add something to what Don was saying about some of the building materials that are being used is that one of the things that it does in the construction of concrete in particular, it can actually strengthen it and lighten it so that we're seeing further benefits that go beyond what we're talking about here, specifically about the carbon reduction, but actually we're looking at material improvements in terms of what you're looking at in terms of the building material. So there are other advantages that are also forthcoming.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Don. So these are the issues that we believe are important to understand when it comes to creating these public-private partnerships in the developing world to drive success. And so what are some of the successes what are the factors that need to be delivered for that success to occur? Well, we've divvied it up into 3 areas. It's not, this is arbitrary essentially because people can look at it different ways. But basically, we put people first. People, then the environment, and then finally profits last. But it has to be profitable because to engage, as we said in the previous 2 presentations, in order to engage people to pay for this, they need to see some form of profit out of it. And so we found the mechanism to do that through the Climate Bond Initiative, but also through development banks to act as guarantors on that. The factors for success, first of all, as I said before, are people. We know that there are talented engineers and developers throughout the developing world, not just in the developed world, and we need to engage with these folks. We need to bring them on board and collaborate. We need experienced business professionals, and there are many. We know them in India, Pakistan, Africa, throughout the developing world, in every country. And also we need to increase the quality of job opportunities for people. In this COVID-driven world, in this pandemic-driven world right now, it's difficult for even the developed nations to deal with this. So the whole world is looking for quality job opportunities, but specifically in developing worlds, this approach of the hybrid approach brings quality jobs to the table, and we need to actually act on it as soon as possible. The next thing, as Mark and Don delineated, the technology is important. We need proven thermal conversion systems. We know that pyrolytic carbon capture and storage systems exist. There are different systems. We predominantly favor pyrolysis as opposed to gasification or torrefaction or simple boilers or kilns. Those are the dominant forms. Now, in places in Africa, people don't even use that technology. Their technology is to simply dig a trench and burn the wood in the trench and create biochar, but it still emits a lot of emissions that way. So we have technology that we can bring that can be affordable through a private-public partnership and create jobs for people to participate in this, and also to not only sequester carbon, but improve soil health, improve water quality, and improve air quality, which gets us to the last issue, environment. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is really important. Now, obviously, it's the developed world that has the greatest amount of that. But by creating a mission in the developing world that we can do this, we're going back to the developed world and say, look, if the developing world can do this, so can you. And we need to be the leaders, meaning the developing world needs to become the leaders, not the followers. And we need to sequester carbon. We need to do it, and we need to do it now. Time is of the essence. There's a canary in the coal mine that I've spoken about before. It's the one that's being tracked at the 14th Street Union Square climate clock. And that means that we're going to be adding a minimum of 2 meters of water within a very short period of time. If we don't do something, and even if we do something, it may not be in time, but we need to act. If we don't act, then we're just giving up and we'll be in big trouble. So we need to act now. We need to do something that will mitigate the risk of 200 million climate migrants from around the world. As seas rise, island countries and island states, their shorelines will diminish. Where people are living on those shorelines, where are they going to go? So we need to create opportunities for that to diminish, but at the same time, if it does occur, create opportunities where we can build infrastructure using this green building material to sequester carbon, and at the same time create living spaces and commercial spaces for people to have their economies in the developing world. And also, we need to manufacture materials for environmental cleanup, and we can do that. We have the technology. It exists, and we welcome people who are mimicking what we're doing. We want them to mimic us. We want them to do it. As we delineated in the last session, people are doing it in Cameroon. The Boston consulting firm is pushing together to try to get 200 smaller pyrolysis systems deployed throughout Cameroon to be able to start producing biochar. That is an admirable task, and we want them to succeed. And we want everyone to be out there doing this as much as possible. The last item,
if I may add to that, Marshall, that one of the things that's so important about this, and that really is one of the reasons that we're involved in the World Talent Economic Forum with Sharif, is that this really has to become a collaborative effort. It's not enough for those of us on our side of the developing world to be able to help the developed world to help the developing world. We need to be able to collaborate. And it's really imperative that the people who are part of the developing world and the talent that is there, and as Marshall was saying, the engineering talent, the business talent that is there, it needs to be a conjunct effort with what we're doing. Otherwise, this is not going to be able to succeed, because there are things about each culture that is different, that need to be addressed, that need to be respected, and be done in a way that actually serves the people who are living in the places where these efforts are being put together.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. This is actually a very important point from World Talent Economy Forum, as we have a expertise and experience for this public-private partnership with the help of Asian Development Bank in developing nations. So if you allow me, Mr. Marshall, I want to share a process. Maybe it will minimize the gap, like what actually Mr. Mark requesting for collaboration. For developing world, it has a clear procedure for public-private partnerships. So corporation like you, if we can follow these procedures, I believe that our success rate will be more effective and we get more success in the project. So if you allow me, I want to give some slides and add some slides for your session.
Please do.
Okay,
Please
thank
do.
you. Thank you. It's actually a long time that World Talent Economy Forums, we are working with different countries' Prime Minister Office, as well as specifically for public-private partnerships. And beside that, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, they are very active for this public-private partnership. But specifically, I want to take a very good models right now in South Asia. Vietnam, Asia Pacific, Vietnam is a very good country for economical positive growth, and another country is Bangladesh from South Asia. This is also a very good model. And with the help of Asian Development Bank, they are making a successful venture for PPP projects. I believe that your organizations, they need more effective support for public-private partnership. So I just share a process what's going on inside the country, and it will be helpful for the collaboration, specifically for our collaboration. The following diagram are the elaborations of the overall PPP project development and approval process, because we need to get approval from the government. Government has clear-cut policy. Process outlined in the policy and strategy for public-private partnership. With the help of this consultation actually come from Asian Development Bank. Detail is added to make clear the work step required to meet certain milestone identify in the policy and strategy. That's why previous session I request what will be the policy impact, because when we go for public-private partnership, policy and strategy create a great impact. Let's say Asian Development Bank, they help Bangladesh government to develop the public-private partnership policy. The detail of which are consistent with the international expertise with the PPP project development. The process was developed with the support of, I already said, the Asian Development Bank technical assistant teams. So there are some abbreviation. When I say ADB, it's mean Asian Development Annual Development Program, ADB, BIFF, Infrastructure and Finance Fund, CCEA, Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs, FIA, 5 years plan, IPA, in principle approval, because lot of abbreviation will come. LM sector line in ministry, MOF Ministry of Finance, PDF Project Development Fund, PPP Public Private Partnership, PPPO Public Private Partnership Office. It's definitely under Prime Minister Office. QTEC Quality and Technical Evaluation Committee, RFP Request for Proposal, RFQ Request for Qualification, TAF Technical Assistant Fund, and VGF Viability Gap Financing. So this is the overview of PPP institution in the context of PPP project lifecycle. So when any organization, let's say this American corporation, they want to develop a project, example in a developing world. So this can be one of the policy. For PPP office, they have the line ministry. Let's say your department definitely under SDG in developing worlds, or the climate change ministries. And when we go to this PPP office or line ministry, they have non-planned budgets. They need Ministry of Finance for the supports, annual development plan for this project, because when we go for PPP, government also contribute for the projects, both in financially and resource based. Bangladesh Infrastructure Financial Fund, they have construction capital, takeout finance, and refinancing, securitization, project development facilities. This is also important. Viability gap funds. So I believe that these are the financial part and other things. Our organization, what we are presenting today, they have very good credibility to managing these points. So there are different stages like early stage projects, tendering and contracting, financial close process, constructions, operation, project portfolio. So MOF for PPP unit, the financial part is specifically the funding and other things. I believe our partners, they will manage with the help of developed world. This is a very good strength this organization has, especially Mr. Marshall. I'm really impressed by your work, because you have a very professional team and very clear-cut idea what you want to do, for the developing world. This is definitely, if I go for a SWOT analysis, this is your strength for your organization. Project identification, definitely you want to focus on waste management. So national infrastructure plan, that's why I say that we need to create a very good basic impact. Let's say a city need a plan. They need this infrastructure plan that they want to develop waste management process with your organization. So plans and policy, they run together. So that's why we need to be very much careful about policy, like how actually developing world policy movings and what type of plan they are taking. So from there's line ministry project identification, I told you this is another important pre-feasibility assessment. Maybe we can start work on that pre-feasibility assessment, preliminary project resource allocation, line ministry proposal for PPP. So definitely we have to work with the line ministry if we want to make successful this public-private partnership. So then we will get this PPO, pre-feasibility assessment. It will develop a business case, evaluating committee. I believe that many countries, especially for this waste management with the help of World Bank and Asian Development Bank, they finish many feasibility study for waste management. We can take helps and we can develop our strategy for implementing the idea. So PPO evaluation committee, definitely they're going to review it, what we develop as a feasibility study or pre-feasibility study. So then we have to go for this go or no go for development. So we then, with the help of governments, they will decide, they will go with us based on the pre-feasibility study, or they will develop projects. So let's say we want to positive, they will go to develop the project. So that time what happened? So in the project development process, this is very crystal clear. Even developing world has very crystal clear procedure. That is the good point. In once time I said that I know many developing nations, they have 100 years of plan. So it's mean that they have a strong policy, they have very good plan. So the corporation like Mr. Marshall has, or this kind of corporation, they have to adapt it, this kind of strategy, then the success rate and everything will go up. So in the project development plan, what we find, one thing is project development and project development fund application. I'm sure that Mr. Marshall corporations, these they have very good fund opportunity for this. PDF fund management reviews, even though they have the fund, they have to review the process. I know that as they are working with GFANs, so their fund developments and management processes are very crystal clear, and it's very effective. So definitely PPO PDF committee approval they need. So when they get this committee approval, they have to go for these agreements, and when they get this PDF projects agreement, they can do this project development things. So project development thing, they need technical specification spaces. So definitely they have a very good technologies. Land is important where we will do these projects. Land acquisition, definitely developing world government gonna help, and then they provide the approval. So beside that, definitely every government had bid designing process, draft contract government support, PKG, P design, PFQ spaces, evaluation criteria. Definitely every government, even the developing world, bid designing is very important. Bid package, this is also important for bid approval. So in this situation, what they will check? They will check the financial viability assessment. Then they will check the revenue model recommendation. Definitely, Mr. Marshall provide a very good idea. People first, then environment, and finally profit. So this is definitely very standard and very good revenue models, which is recommended by his organization. Then we get this PPPU financial sanctions. Maybe definitely they will get it from the global arena. In principle, VFG funding committee and VFG recommendation. This is also important in this bidding process. And all of the procedure, I told you, it's a consulting by Asian Development Bank. So definitely the process they're designing, country like Bangladesh, they are following. So these are the very important aspects. There are very good effective process, and if the bid package, like example bid process, win by any specific corporations, definitely in this area they have to work with line ministry. They have to focus on RFQ evaluation, invitations of the bid, project briefing, pre-bid conference. This is also important. That's why we mainly prefer a lot of conference and summit, because even this public-private partnership, those who work under Prime Minister office, they also prefer a lot of conference, because conference actually show the credibility. Let's say example, Mr. Marshall bring excellent presentations. This is also a very good recorded, that this kind of records actually help the government to take their decisions. So this is the criteria and a lot of issues. So when we get like any organization win the bids, so naturally they can when they win the bid, they can go for negotiation contract, finalize government support, initial contract, final terms of lending, LPAD approval. This is also important. CCEA approval, financial close. On the other hand, line terms of lendings. They have to follow other debt financing, other debt DD, other debt terms of financing, creditors agreements, credit committee approvals. These are the lot of activities, especially based on credit committee consultation. This is also important. I believe that Mr. Marshall and his team has very good things, and definitely they are expert on financial issues. Expert in financial issues, so they have to know, and they already understand, because they have 7 joint ventures, what I know. So definitely they know how these things happen. But anyway, even in this process, they have dispute process. But what we have to follow from the public private partnerships point of view. So satisfaction of condition precedents, as well as mobilizations, construction, commissioning, operations, handover of transfer debt. These are the many deadline, acceptance, payment, preference, reviews, all of the very crystal clear. Definitely, I'm going to share with Mr. Marshall and his teams. It's a very crystal clear process from the developing world. And this is open. Actually, this is open. This is not like something behind the scene. No, very open and very crystal clear process. And I believe the developing nations has a lot of opportunity, especially in these COVID-19 situations. I want to request the organization like you, please come and join the developing world. Their economy also good. They have crystal clear procedure. You see, it's from 2010. They have a crystal clear process, and they have their committee, they have their expert peoples. I know many Ivy League people, they go back to their country, they are serving for their countries. We also want to develop the developing world. So there is a very crystal clear procedures. So if we can follow, example, any corporation can follow, not only Mr. Marshall's, they can achieve the objective. Things is that consistency, let's say 2-3 years plans, and a good team. So I believe Mr. Marshall has a very good team, very professional attitudes. I think financial model is excellent. So why not? Maybe he and his team can contribute for the developing worlds. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Sharif. That is an excellent set of rules of the road, as we call them, on how to work in the developing world. I want to sort of pick up on the mention, and I did mention it before. There are other people out there that are beginning to adopt our approach. I'm going to mention, not besides the Boston Consulting Group, there's another group out there that we know is genuine, and they're not what we call, what Don has terminology-wise called bio-charlatans, people who claim one thing and do another, greenwashing. There's a group out there called Biochar Now, which is based in the United States, and we seek to work and collaborate with people such as themselves to bring their other technologies to the table and do these collaborations as well. We want all legitimate players to participate. There's enough out there for everyone. The Boston Consulting Group is a well-known group. It's got a lot of funding behind it. They've developed an entity for this to develop over the next several years 200 pyrolytic carbon capture and storage systems in Cameroon alone. But there are challenges for these, as we've talked about. And I kind of like to go to the question and answer component that we're getting questions on this panel right now. So one of them says, I think it's
Onika Shams.
Yes.
Her question is, why did we think decent work and economic growth are important? Because I believe, especially from the developing world, they like your approach, the approach that you want to create job opportunities. So young people, they like this approach, and they want to learn more how you can create decent work and economic growth through your project.
So the answer to that, and I can open it up to the rest of my panel and colleagues here. The answer, generally speaking, in very straightforward terms and transparent terms, is you create growth by turning a threat, which is the climate crisis, in which we need to sequester carbon, we need to improve water quality that is being diminished by environmental pollution, and improve soil health, which is has been diminished through big ag approach to agriculture and heavy uses of fertilizer to being able to turn to a more what we would call a green solution, so to speak, a natural solution in which we can take the wastes and convert them into natural resources. The EU made a commitment in March of 2020 under Angela Merkel, the previous Chancellor of Germany. She led, she's a physicist by background, and in case you didn't know, she's a scientist. She understands the scientific method. She's not a climate scientist, but she gathered climate science around her, and she encouraged the economic forum of the EU Council and the EU Parliament to adopt a circular economy approach. That's why the climate bond in Europe is so important. People who will offtake our products that we can deliver to the world know that what we're doing is not greenwashing, know that we're under the climate bond taxonomies of waste management, and there are other taxonomies out there. There are those for agriculture, there are those for green building, as Mark had pointed out, and there are now developing one for hydrogen, which is difficult because there are a lot of people out there claiming that hydrogen is blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, white hydrogen, and a lot of this hydrogen development is actually more polluting than actually drilling for oil. So one needs to be careful of what we're doing. So that's why we encourage the Climate Bond Initiative to create the taxonomy for hydrogen. And there are other taxonomies out there for the renewable world. One of the other, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say that in addition, there are a number of technical jobs that would be involved directly in the kind of work that advanced resilient technology would be implementing for engineers and scientists, and also the byproducts, which then extend beyond what we're doing directly, so that they do go into the farms, they do go into the water treatment plants. So there are a lot of other aligned jobs that associated with that. But you also have to remember that when you start to develop a local economy, that there are all the other people that are actually supporting that economy. So there are jobs that go well beyond the direct jobs that are being created to do the technical work that we're talking about. But then there are all the people that need to support. There's the medical professionals. There are the people who are the service professionals who are helping to feed people, that are doing all the other jobs, the ancillary jobs that are also being developed at that time.
That's a good point, Mark. There's a model in the United States, an economic model called the 4 gas station model. What does that mean? If you have one gas station on a corner, it might or might not be successful. But if it attracts 3 other gas stations, believe it or not, suddenly you have a commercial center. And I'm not promoting gas stations per se, but that's the economic model from the 1950s and 60s that actually created a lot of the economic 19 trillion or 20 trillion economy of the United States, let alone the EU. So I think what we need to do is we need to recognize what Mark said, that when you bring a certain type of set of technologies to bear that solve a climate issue, which is imminent, we actually can create more jobs, create better quality of life for the people that are participating in these economies, especially in the developing world. I think there was another thing that Don wanted to contribute.
Yeah, there are jobs created across the value chain. So if we realize that in Malaysia alone, there are 168 million tons of biomass, waste biomass produced and produced a year. Someone has to grow that biomass. I mean, some of it happens in forests, yes, but other can be fast-growing turnover crops like bamboo and even hemp, which do an amazingly effective job of capturing carbon from the atmosphere, and don't necessarily compete for food or for other sources that are required. So there are people involved in the cultivation. I was working not long ago on a project in Indonesia, on the where the island of Nusa Penida had been deforested. And it was where the Indonesian monarchy used to send people that it didn't want to kill, but just wanted them out of the way. And in the process, that island was deforested. And a company called John Hardy, which was a jewelry company, wanted to afforest, that is, plant bamboo on that island, but do it by giving bamboo seedlings to the local families on that island so that they could grow bamboo in combination with complex agroforestry, and they would guarantee to buy the bamboo from them at maturity. So there are jobs created in the afforestation, cultivation of biomass. The second is transportation. This is where local companies with effective capabilities to transport the biomass to a central facility that has the kind of scale to convert it through pyrolysis into biochar and syngas are also created. Those are opportunities for local companies that are effective in waste management and logistics. Then, of course, there are all of the other engineering jobs that are created and technical jobs that are created in the thermal conversion process itself and in the transformation of the elemental biochar into more complex products, whether they be filtration systems or whether they be building materials. I think it's also important to recognize that as much as there are existing frameworks in Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Asia for joint ventures and public-private partnerships, these frameworks have consistently fallen short of the tremendous need for green infrastructure and climate adaptation infrastructure and carbon removal. And on that basis, even the Asia Development Bank, in a most recent report called Catalyzing Climate Finance, talks about the need for new, innovative finance de-risking mechanisms, credit enhancement approaches, new ways to approach the incredible demand for carbon removal and adaptation of existing infrastructure. So while those are in place, we're still seeing the need for radical innovation, not just in the technology, but in the financial mechanisms that help to appropriately apportion risk, and not just technical risk, but political risk and other risks, so that the securitization, the monetization, the liquidity of a project can be achieved through mechanisms like the climate bond mechanism, which now makes those debt issues attractive to institutional investors like Larry Fink at BlackRock, who will only invest if he sees market rates with appropriate risk-adjusted returns. BlackRock's investment in ESG funds and debt increased by double last year to over $500 billion. Well, he's got $10 trillion invested in his portfolios. So the capacity is there if we can make the debt instruments attractive to institutional investors who are seeking ESG issues. And that provides the liquidity for local governments in the developing world so that instead of just making concessional funds available to joint ventures, they can now leverage new structures for climate finance guarantee funds rather than concessional loans that multiply the effectiveness of that capital tenfold, so we can increase our investment in carbon capture, adaptation, and climate mitigation tenfold.
Thank you, Don. That is exactly the point. I think it answers across the board a lot of these questions. What strategies help employment and decent work lead to poverty eradication? That is a definite strategy that we are employing, and we're welcoming everyone to participate in that. In addition to that, what happens is if we don't do the global goals? We didn't answer that. We'll get to that in a minute. What is the relationship between employment and economic growth in the underdeveloped nations? We've answered that question. And we've also answered why did we think decent work and economic growth are important? We know it's important. Without it, three things are going to happen post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic. One, we have a climate crisis that is gaining at an exponential rate, at an increased rate. There's not enough work being done unless we act now. And that's why we encourage groups like the Boston Consulting Group, like Biochar Now, and other legitimate players to come to the table and participate and work to get what Don just described to happen. And we know we can do it because we're doing it. As Sharif pointed out, we have formed 7 joint ventures. I know that Biochar now forms joint ventures. I know that Boston Consulting Group forms joint ventures. These are the mechanisms, and public-private partnerships are an important part of that process in the developing world. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out, and that is the question is, what happens if we didn't do the global goal, reach the global goals for 2030? Well, it's not good news, folks. Just look at the climate clock. We're going to have more increased carbon emissions. We're going to have a diminishment of the quality of water around the world. There's only so much potable water that's drinkable. And sure, it's true that both Saudi Arabia and Israel create desalination plants that they're using, but it's not enough. Israel's about the size of the state of New Jersey. It's maybe 9 million folks altogether. I know that Jordan, the Palestinians, and Israelis are collaborating through a special program to create a sustainability approach. We participated in an event where we went from Jordan to Israel. It was a swim across the Dead Sea. It's an unusual event because if you've ever been to the Dead Sea, it's mostly salt, not water. But basically, it was to promote the resurgence and the restructuring of the Jordan Valley River Rift. And all 3 entities were collaborating and are collaborating to this day. Nobody talks about that, but that's what's happening. Because without water and without sustainability, no matter what the politics are, no matter what your vision are, you won't have a life there. So it need to be done. That's an example. Another example is where people around the world, especially in developing worlds, have problems. In India, there's a tremendous amount of burning of rice hulls. And we know that we can address that right now, not 10 years from now, not by 2070, as Prime Minister Modi indicated. We can make net zero happen a lot faster, and we're willing to collaborate with the Indian state governments and the Indian government and private entities in India to make that happen. And we will bring as many assets and as many players to the table that we know that are legitimate to help make that happen. It's not about us. It's not about us. It's about you and the developing world creating better quality jobs, better quality of life, and reduce the threat of the climate crisis to your nation. And if it doesn't do it for one, it needs to be done for all. If one doesn't do it, it's going to still threaten everybody else. So we need to act together. We need to act in a collaborative approach. And that is what Mark spoke about, what Don spoke about, and what I'm talking about, and what Sharif showed in his slide deck. So again, thank you very much. If there are any other questions, we're more than willing to take them, Sharif.
Yes, from my side, the working flow for PPP projects, the model, I should send it to you in your email. So hopefully it will be helpful for understanding a country, specific country. Maybe when you do it in Malaysia, it will be a little bit of different, but more or less structure will be the same. Or in other country, more or less structure will be the same. So thank you, Mr. Marshalls, Mr. Dan, as well as Mr. Mark, for your excellent presentations. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum need people like you, those who love to take action. Action is important. We need to take some actions. We need to finish some jobs, and we need to work together to solving many complex problems, because this COVID actually indicator this world has problem. We need to work hard. We need to solve this problem. So that's why World Talent Economy Forum also taking actions. We are working with Indian governments. March 22, we are launching a very special episode with Jal Shakti Mantralaya. It's been Water Ministry in India. Beside that, with Sabha and Sarawak, we are developing a very exclusive project for this climate change, for this impact investment, as well as we are working with the Australian governments. Especially we are focusing in Adelaide. Hopefully, with the help of your dynamic teams, we can solve many problems in Asia Pacific. Besides that, we are working with Rwanda governments, with these African countries. So developing world, I always believe they have people, they have a lot of problems. They need entrepreneur like you. An entrepreneur need to take action for solving this problem. And I really like your model. People definitely must need to come first. We need to care about people. So talent economy also, we care about people. So thank you, everyone. This is excellent session and valuable
You're
session
welcome,
for us.
Sharif. I just want to state before we close that we will continue this forum. We have other methods and other things that we need to share with the developing world and people around the world. We will be talking about some of the aspects of biochar, what is real, what is not, what is biocharlatanism, what is not, what is the real deal. How do you know when you're getting real carbon sequestration from either biochar or from other issues? We will be dealing in another forum on water, to kind of prep people for that March 23rd meeting. So to give them a sense of what kind of things we can do, that there's multiple choices in solving water and creating jobs and creating and putting people first, then the environment, and then profits in that order. So we look forward to being a part of this forum, Sharif, the World Talent Economic Forum. Thank you so much for having us. And that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we heavily focused on the developing world, and especially we are working with this Public-Private Partnership Authority, the chairmans, this is under definitely Prime Minister Office, the chairmans and everyone we are inviting. So if we continue this kind of dialogue, definitely in some point, this kind of people, they will join in the dialogue and they will share their experience with our team. So definitely it will be helpful. So thank you, Mr. Dan. I'm really impressed by your knowledge, Mr. Mark. I'm really impressed by your work. And Mr. Marshalls, you are one of the great entrepreneurs for World Talent Economy Forum. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with your academy, with your corporations. Through this process, we can solve many problems together. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.